with Tracy Davies, a registered nutritionist and SOS Feeding Therapist who works with children experiencing picky eating and feeding difficulties, ARFID, autism, and ADHD. Now, let's be honest, feeding, it's pretty scary. It's scary because when your child is not eating, the stress levels go from 0 to 4,000%. So today we're going to really unpack why picky eating is so common for autistic kids, why it's something that we really need to look at, what we need to know about safe foods, nutrition, and why sometimes the usual advice just doesn't work. So Tracy, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talking about all things feeding and hopefully provide parents with some useful advice that can help them either start their journey or pick up where they're going to help their child with their feeding.
Excellent. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. Why is it that that feeding can be really difficult for autistic children? What does that even look like?
Okay, so I think first of all, picky eating is common in childhood generally, particularly between the ages of 2 to 5. But autistic children can experience additional barriers. But there's two things I kind of preface here that I want parents to know. Number one is that eating is really a learned skill. So just like our developmental milestones for, crawling, walking, talking, we also have milestones for eating in terms of, oral motor development, coordinating, chewing and swallowing. So there is a very delineated skill pattern that we do have for children around eating. And also when you think about eating, it's an incredibly complex task. So, all of us have to navigate tolerating, food's sensory properties, the textures, smells, tastes, sounds. We have to coordinate chewing and swallowing. We have to think about listening and recognizing our hunger fullness cues. We have to cope with food unpredictability. We then have to sit in busy environments and also feel safe enough to then eat. So when you think about eating, and I think as adults, I think we forget, and for us, eating is quite easy for most of us. So we kind of just think it is sit down, eat, done, get up and go. But when you think about how complex a task it is for everyone, and then for children, autistic children who may have particular issues that enhance some of those things, it is an incredibly complex task. So in terms of some potential root causes for kids on the spectrum, sensory processing disorder is a big one. So I think, around 85% of kids with autism also have sensory processing disorder. And this can make eating overwhelming in terms of what we just talked about, from a sensory perspective of the food, from the taste, the texture, temperatures, even appearance of food, and also the feeding environment, So when we're thinking about lights, noise, distractions, all of those things can be quite overwhelming for a child who might have that sensory processing disorder. Gastrointestinal issues is a big one that I see with clients. Kids who have constipation, reflux, bloating, stomach pain. This can all reduce appetite and it can also change food preferences as well. So it could be something there that is affecting them, and particularly if kids are gravitating towards those beige style diets that might be lacking in fiber and maybe not having enough fluid, this can be quite a big issue for them. Another one is oral dysphagia and hypotonia, so low muscle tone, both orally, so our ability to chew and swallow foods, but then also our ability to sit at a sitting position at the table. And if kids are sitting at, say, an adult dining table on an adult chair, it's not built for them. So they may have to hold themselves, when we think about holding our muscles up and using our stomach muscles and our abs to hold ourselves to sit up, it's easier for us. But kids with low muscle tone, that can be incredibly difficult and that can make eating harder. Nutrient deficiencies, so particularly iron, zinc, magnesium, B12, vitamin D, these can all contribute to a lack of appetite, but also can contribute to an abnormal sense of smell and taste. So it can make kids, gravitate towards particular foods and stay away from other ones. And then finally, medications. So medications, particularly stimulants. So if your child is taking an ADHD medication, this can be a big one that can reduce appetite and also affect their metabolic rate. So it could speed up their metabolism or slow it down. So making them either lose weight or gain weight. So that's a big factor there. And then additionally, any additional medical considerations that they may have. So I see a lot of kids who might have food allergies or intolerances, additional medical conditions, intellectual disability, things like that. This all makes eating very difficult for them. I would say in terms of when it becomes concerning, so I normally say to parents, like, let's look at, is it affecting their nutrition, growth, their development, their emotional well-being, and also their ability to participate in everyday life. And if it's sort of starting to get to that point, red flags as a professional. So we look at, if they're eating less than 20 foods, are they vomiting, gagging, choking, or is there extreme distress around new foods? Is there strong refusal of whole food groups, which is very common? Poor weight gain or growth concerns, nutritional deficiencies, mealtime stress for the whole family, or any fear and anxiety around food. They're normally our red flags where we would sort of say, okay, I think your child might need some additional support.
So interesting, and that's just like a whole heap of stuff. But I wanted to ask you, with regards to nutrition, what does that look like, and how do we know that our child is getting enough nutrition?
Okay, so I often get parents, coming to me very concerned that their child is eating only 5 or 10 foods, and they're concerned that they're not getting everything they need. And I think one of the things I want parents to think about here is its nutritional risks depend on which foods are missing, not necessarily how many foods the child is eating. So, for instance, your child might only have 20 foods they're eating, but they might have foods from each food group in that in all those categories. So they might be getting what they need. But common nutritional concerns I see in clinic include not having a balanced diet or having some of those food groups completely dropped. Nutrient deficiencies, as I just mentioned, iron, zinc, magnesium, B12, vitamin D, can all contribute to fatigue, low mood, poor concentration, appetite changes. Constipation, this is a big one because it, as I mentioned just before, it can affect appetite, but also then types of foods that kids are wanting to eat as well, particularly if impaction might be involved where they're not feeling that hungry. So that's something we want to manage. And also underweight and overweight malnourishment. And I think when people think about malnourishment, we tend to focus more on underweight because that's probably what we've grown up to understand, but it can occur in overweight as well. So, particularly if we have that sort of beige diet where we're maybe not getting our fruit and veg and other nutrients we need. But in all honesty, in my professional career so far, I have yet to come across a child who is completely malnourished. We might have a few gaps in our diet, but overall, their body is getting them what they need. We're just trying to enhance that and to help them move forward in expanding their diet. So some of the areas I commonly assess is protein intake, particularly if a child is avoiding meat, eggs, legumes, or other protein-rich foods, iron levels, and this is obviously especially if they're not eating a lot of meat or iron-fortified foods. And iron is probably one that I would say to parents that, we really, to test iron levels, we really want blood work because we don't want to mess around with giving our kids iron unless we have to, because then that can also contribute to constipation and other issues. So really making sure that, we've got some markers there to look at where possible if iron is an issue for the child. Calcium and vitamin D, fiber and fluids. So looking at that kind of whole diet. And I think one of the biggest things I look at for kids is, are they eating enough? That's my first point, is what is their volume of food? If they are not eating enough food, I'm not going in and making any changes because it's going to make it even harder. We want to maintain the food that they're eating to make sure they're eating enough food to give them the energy they need to get through the day. We can then start to work on that. And I think that's where letting parents know that we can work on nutrition and food expansion at the same time. So parents don't need to wait for their kids to eat broccoli and chicken before improving their nutrition. We aren't focusing on a perfect diet to start with. We're going to focus on where some of those biggest nutritional gaps are and work on those while we also work on the child's feeding skills. So that might look like looking to fortification, so fortifying food. So say we're needing to boost iron, we might be looking at breads that are iron fortified, or other foods that are iron fortified that we can mix in or change out for some kids. We might be looking for nutritionally stronger versions of foods for kids that they currently eat. We might be looking towards food chaining, where we're going to look at trying to chain out to some different options for kids to make them a little bit healthier, to boost them. We might look at changing combinations. So say, for instance, a child has that primarily beige diet, and say they're having cereal for breakfast with no milk, but they will drink milk, but they won't have it with their cereal. So we might just be looking to pair that glass of milk and cereal together. So they're eating their cereal dry, but they're drinking the milk. It's pairing some protein with some carbohydrate. It's going to boost that nutritional intake for them there as well. And then finally, we might look at supplementation, dependent on the child and what they're lacking, and where we can support that in the short term to boost them up, to get them going. So they're kind of the areas that I would start with looking at in relation to nutrition.
All right, so there's definitely so many layers to it, and I think that is so important for parents to understand. It is peeling an onion. We really need to look at everything before we just jump in and just like attack it with full force. We often talk about, especially in the feeding area, around safe foods. And a lot of parents have been told to not take away safe foods because, that might make things worse. Where do we stand with that? Like, is it better to keep continuing to offer it, or, should we be like, no, you can't have it anymore, in hopes that we can get them to eat more?
Yep, no, absolutely. I'm a big advocate for safe foods, because a preferred food kids don't often eat it just because it tastes better. And I mean, quite often, let's face it, it does, but it's more that it's predictable. So for instance, if I have an example here of Savoy biscuits and blueberries, can you see those? So if we're eating our Savoy biscuits, and when you think about kids who gravitate towards a beige style diet, in this packet of Savoy biscuits, you're going to be hard pressed to find one that doesn't look the same, smell the same, taste the same. Potentially they might be broken, and to some kids who visually changes like that are important. Most kids, that's okay. So I don't have to think when I eat these foods, because it's predictable. It's the same and consistent. Every time I ate it last time, it was the same. When I eat it this time, it's going to be the same. I don't need to think. That gives me consistency, takes away the unpredictability, and makes things comfortable for me. And for a lot of kids on the spectrum, that unpredictability and inconsistency is a really big anxiety producing thing. So when we're, for instance, with our whole foods, so when we're thinking fruit, vegetables, meats, and even meals that we cook as a family, because we can never make them exactly the same each time. They're going to be kind of different each time. One time it might be a little bit overcooked. The other time it might not be as salty. But when, for instance, looking at our blueberries, in this packet of blueberries, we're going to have some that are sweet, some that are sour, some that are big and juicy, some that are small. There is a lot of variation in our whole foods, and kids have an inability to generalize and understand that. So for most kids, if I eat a blueberry today and it's juicy and sweet, and then tomorrow I eat it, I can't think, well, blueberries aren't in season at the moment, so they're going to be a bit more sour than sweet. I was lucky to get a sweet one. It's okay. To them, it's like, what? This is disgusting. I'm never eating this again. So safe foods have a definite purpose, and they provide that familiarity. Especially if your kid's got a limited diet, they're providing energy and security around eating. So we do not want to get rid of those. We want to think about having a safe food and opportunities to learn about new foods. We can combine them together.
Would you say that having safe foods is like a co-regulation sort of thing?
Absolutely. And that is one of the biggest things. I'm a big advocate around mealtime routines for kids, and how, getting them to the table, how we serve the food, having a similar routine for that as consistent as possible, because that helps take away that uncertainty and it helps kids regulate. And we have a saying in our feeding and nutrition industry in terms of rest and digest. So when we're in a regulated state, our body is open, calm, we're digesting food we're eating, we're happy. But as soon as anxiety hits us, we hit that fight or flight state. And as soon as that fight or flight state is triggered, the first thing that shuts down is our appetite. So if we're constantly in that state, we're not going to be open or willing to come and eat or try things. So we really do have to work on regulating that nervous system to keep kids there. And that safe food is going to let kids know that every meal I come to, there is going to be 1 to 2 safe foods on that table that I know I can eat. There'll always be maybe a food I sometimes eat, and then maybe there's always going to be a food that's a new food that I don't have to go to eating straight away, but we can learn about it and work up to that. So it just helps to take away that uncertainty, definitely regulate that nervous system to help bring them to the table, to help them move forward with what we're trying to achieve with expanding their diet.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because, you know, as a coach, I often will, you know, speak to my clients about co-regulation and how they're co-regulating with any sort of thing, whether it's coffee, drugs, whatever it is, right? And it's interesting. If I went up to those parents and said, "No, you don't want to have coffee anymore. Suck it. Suck eggs in the morning. You can just drink your orange juice and you can be happy about it," right? Those parents would like literally lose.
You'd lose a lot of parents.
They would lose their minds and they would like probably get so angry and so dysregulated that they would want to scream. So I think the importance of me saying this is that having a safe food and allowing that child to have those safe foods, as frustrated as a parent may be, that you're like, Lord, can we please expand from this? Know that that is their way of regulating, right? So like,
Absolutely.
just like if I took your coffee away, you'd be pretty PO'd. So like, don't take away these safe foods from these beautiful children who are using this thing as a way to regulate their bodies in a stressful experience, especially if eating is hard. They know they can rely on that one thing. So I wanted to really stress that point for parents because it's such a super important point. And I think that parents sometimes we can get that frustration or we can not see the point of safe foods. And I really wanted to hone in on that.
Absolutely.
Should parents, in terms of helping children try new things, what is something that parents can do to help them expand that diet and expand that food range?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest things that we can focus on is in terms of probably the first thing I would say to parents to do is we want to look at their current diet. What foods are they eating? Because we were just talking about the safe foods, we want to have 1 to 2 safe foods on their plate. So I kind of have some rules to mealtime. So I call them my 6 rules to mealtimes. So we're including on that plate a safe food. So that's a food your child eats at least 90% of the time. And every meal or snack you're serving is going to have some of that safe food on it. We then want to look to include a sometimes food, and that's when it's a food that your child might eat 50% of the time. And the goal here is that we want to try and push that sometimes food into that safe food category because it's a food they know and they'll sometimes eat. So we want to try and help them push that into that category. We then want to try and include a still exploring food, and that might be a new or non-preferred food that your child doesn't like yet, but it could also be a food they used to eat and have dropped, that we want to try and bring back in. And so, because yes, if we want our kids to eat new foods, we have to serve them to them. So we want to try and make sure that we're putting them on. So what we want to do then is we want to try and do small portions of everything that we're giving them. So preferred foods and still exploring foods, we want to do small. So let's say, for instance, that might look like your child loves chicken nuggets. So we might have, and say normally we give them 6 chicken nuggets. We might put 3 on the plate to start with. We'll have cooked up 6, but we'll have 3 on the plate to start with. They might love chips, so we might put some French fries, homemade French fries on there, or store-bought French fries, and say they sometimes eat some sweet potato chips. So we might do maybe a small portion of regular fries and a small portion of sweet potato fries and some strawberries that they maybe sometimes eat as well. Then we might have a learning food that we're going to put on, or a still exploring food, and that might be, say, we've cooked up some of the family meal, or it might be some broccoli or some carrots, but we'll have a few, maybe just a few of them or one of them there. And what we want to try and do then, and this is where I think it's more about how we approach the plates and how we approach the strategies we're using to help move our kids up, as opposed to just giving them the preferred food, because we know our child is going to eat the preferred food first. That's what they're going to do. But we want to try and then stall them a little bit to try and get interaction with some of these other foods. And that's where we want to try and spark some of their curiosity and interest in the foods on the plate. So for younger kids, that might look like more some food play that we're going to try and get them to do with some of those new foods or less preferred foods. For older kids, it might be food exploration. And I think it's important to understand here, because probably a lot of the advice I'm giving, and I am very appreciative of the fact that autism is on a spectrum, and have some kids who are high functioning and we have some kids who are lower functioning. So this part about, getting that stalling and interaction is going to look different for every child, because depending on where they're at on that spectrum and what they're capable of, we have to put that together to help them move them forward. Because me giving, an older kid, here's some trucks to, let's move the truck, let's cut this up here and move this over here, that's not going to cut it. But as equally, me giving a younger child, what do we think, from a sensory perspective, this food, that's not going to cut it. So it's being tailored towards the kids to help them. So in terms of what we've just talked about, identifying your child's food and sensory profile is a big one. So we want to make sure we're thinking about, do they like crunchy foods? Do they like chewy foods? Do they like sweet foods, salty foods, hot, cold foods? When is the best time for them to eat? Is it breakfast, lunch, dinner, afternoon snacks? Because this can then help us fit together in our plan the best time to introduce new foods, and also ways we can introduce them that closely match the properties of what they're currently eating. So we don't want to go into it just blind. We want to try and be targeted about how we're going to introduce these and when. And again, this is where working with families, you've really got to be open and mindful to their time constraints, their ability to cook, what they're capable of, particularly the parents, because obviously we're there to support the child, but for most of them, particularly if they're children, it's the parents who are doing the heavy lifting and the hard yards. And I want to make sure that we're tailoring these solutions that the parents are capable of doing it as well, because there's no point in me sitting here going, every night we're going to be doing this, and parents don't have time. They've got therapies to go to, they've got extracurricular activities, they've got work. So targeting that might look different for everyone. So that might, for some families, they can do every night. Some families might be just on a weekend. Some families, it might be outside of meal times if that's the best opportunity for their child, so it might be snack times or outside of, just an opportunity where they can come and help cut some fruit up. They don't have to eat it or anything. We're just starting at that level that we can build up from. But it is we do want to have a structured approach, and it is very much a tailored approach where we're thinking, not just going into it blindly. We're going to be thinking about what foods our kids eat, when's the best time to eat, and how we can match that to their needs.
That makes so much sense from the point of view that, you and me, we're probably different, right? I'm an early bird. I love waking up at the crack of dawn and starting the day. Some people are like, leave me alone in the morning. I am my best time is at midnight, right? Or at 11 o'clock or whatever it is. So it would make sense that you would need to find the right time of when your child is ready to eat. Because I know for a fact my daughter, she is a true European. She wants breakfast at 10 o'clock in the morning, right? She's like, no, I do not want to eat at 7 o'clock in the morning. I want to be I'll have it at 10 o'clock and I'll have whatever I'm going to have. Whereas I'm like, well, that's great, but that's not how the school works, right? Because you've got school and the constraints and everything else. But it makes sense to work out a sensory diet. And is that something that you do with your clients, that you map out what that looks like and the time of the day, or do the parents need to do
Absolutely. No. So that is part of our consultation. We sit down, we map out what foods their child currently eats, and I put that into a current food list of foods they love, sometimes eat, food they've dropped, break that up into our macronutrients, and then put together an example meal plan of how we can use foods they're currently eating to structure meals around that while introducing new foods to help them get started. That's partly what I do. But it's interesting, yes, for parents, for kids who get up in the mornings and, particularly if they're taking stimulant medication where their appetite's dropping off during the day, we want to make sure we're trying to get food into them before school. And unfortunately, life doesn't accommodate our kids to some extent. So a lot of my philosophy as well is something's better than nothing. So if we can get something in first thing off what they're eating again, and that's where I can help parents pair foods as well to go, you know what, let's do a little tub of cereal with, a half a cup of milk. It doesn't have to be a full cup or a quarter cup. Just something's better than nothing to just, put things together to help move them forward, to make sure that they're not starting their day on an empty stomach. And, I've got a teenager now who is ASD, ADHD, and we take stimulant medication. So, and, unfortunately, melatonin shifts in adolescence, so their ability to get up early is very hard. But working to make sure that we're sustaining him to get through the day by having something in the morning can really help. So really thinking about your child, and as I said, best time to eat, food preferences can help us put that plan together to give us a starting point and enable us to think about where we can make changes.
Might be a bit of a question out of left field, but it just came to me and I wanted to ask you, should parents, if they're like seeing picky eating, should parents automatically go and get like allergy testing done to see if their child is allergic to specific foods, or like completely off the wrong end of the deep end?
No, so I would say no, because normally, as I said, particularly with food allergies, there's normally immediate effects that you'll be noticing. So there'll be effects, like seizing up in the throat, hives, things like that, where normally if it's an allergy, it will be automatic that you could see something's not right. They're having a reaction to that food. Intolerances, you still will get reactions. It could be, but it's normally gastrointestinal. So it could be diarrhea, it could be bloating, things like that. But again, it normally occurs after the foods. Normally what we can try, and so if you're worried about that, and obviously as a nutritionist, we can then put together like a food diary where we can maybe map out foods your child is eating, and if they're having any particular negative reactions to that, we could then maybe say, hey, we might be looking at getting tested for some things. But if there are no general reactions, I would say that's not a first starting point that I would be concerned about.
Yep, no, that's great. I always think if parents had this on their mind, like just in case that they wanted to know, I'd rather ask the question than not. Now, you've touched on this a little bit, but what's a great first step for parents to start with if they're noticing picky eating, or if their child's already well and truly into the journey of picky eating, or having trouble trying to cook? What should they start doing?
Yep. So I would recommend starting mapping out our foods. So we want to map out and identify as many safe, accepted foods as we can. And as I said before, so that's foods they love, like, sometimes eat, for some even mapping out some foods they used to eat, and then thinking about those profiles, the texture, the taste, the flavor, so we can start to map out what they're currently eating. And maybe, my child loves crunchy foods that are sweet and salty and that are cold. So then I know that that's kind of a starting point. So when we're then trying to food chain out later on, we're going to start to think about some of those profiles to match as we move out. Establishing a predictable meal and snack routine is critical. And this one's super important, because when I talk about this, what I mean is we want to make sure we've got 3 main meals and 2 to 3 snacks in the day. So that could be breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, dinner, and potentially an after dinner snack or dessert. And there's a few reasons we want to establish this. So the first one is, and this is a really big one, around taking some pressure off dinner time, because dinner time is often the sticking point for parents with kids refusing the bulk of the food. But what we want to do is that helps us to, if we're taking a step back and we've got this meal and snack routine set up, and we're taking a step back and we're looking at our child's eating over a day, and we can say, for breakfast, they had their dry cereal and half a cup of milk, and they had it all. For morning tea, they ate 3/4 of it. For lunch, they ate half their lunch. For afternoon tea, they ate all of it. Coming into dinner, we've got our preferred foods on that plate too. So they've eaten, say, 2 foods off their plate, half of their sometimes food, and we've got a little bit of interaction with some new foods. And then let's say after dinner, we might have an after dinner snack, say a piece of toast and another cup of milk. We can look back over that day and know that our kid has got eaten the volume of food that's going to keep them going. And coming into dinner, that can take a little bit of pressure off having to eat optimally at every meal, particularly dinner. So we can make it a little bit more about a learning experience, particularly with some of the new foods, knowing that they're not going to bed starving. It can also be having that meal routine can be incredibly important if your child is a grazer, and particularly if kids gravitate to our more beige style foods, because it is sort of our more basic carbohydrates that tend to blood sugar up, blood sugar down, blood sugar up, blood sugar down. So we want food constantly throughout the day. So we're grazing. And the issue with grazing is that it can then take away their appetite. So they're not coming to the table at meal times hungry. So having those structured meal times and snacks can help get our child from breakfast to morning tea coming in a little bit hungry, from morning tea to lunch coming in a little bit hungry, et cetera, et cetera. So it can just help to promote that appetite and then allow us to try and capture that interaction with some of those foods as well. Then I'd probably say we want to try and focus from our foods on maybe one food learning activity a week, and that could be focusing on 1 to 2 foods, and we can then look to start to food chain out from that. So, food chaining is making small differences to foods starting where the child is at. So let's say, for instance, our child wants McDonald's chicken nuggets, that's all they eat, and we want to get them to a chicken breast. So we might make small changes, and this I'll just give a standard one, but it's very different for every kid, because we're moving at the pace that the child is capable and confident at, and we tend to then stay at that new change for a little bit before moving on. But let's just say we've got McDonald's chicken nuggets. We then might move to exploring chicken nuggets from other fast food places. So we might go KFC, we might go Hungry Jack's and see if we can pick up some from there. We then might move to store-bought ones that match the texture and taste of, say, our McDonald's ones. We then will move to maybe homemade chicken nugget if we can. Then we might move to a chicken tender. We might move a store-bought chicken tender, then a homemade chicken tender. Then we might move to a schnitzel, and then we might move to maybe a lightly crumbed chicken breast, and then move to a chicken breast. So there's a lot of sort of steps that we're sort of taking to get from one food to the next, because some kids can go big steps. So some kids can go from here to here easily. Others, it's going to be a small process, small changes. It might be initially, it's the same food, we're just changing the look of it. So let's say they love pancakes. We might be then getting cookie cutters and just cutting shapes out of the pancake. So it's still the same pancake, it just looks different. And so the changes really depend on the child, how big and small we start, but moving them forward in that respect. And I think another thing here is that we want to track progress beyond eating. So we're looking at things like tolerance, interaction, curiosity, engagement, regulation, because those things are as equally important, if not more, than the final destination of getting them to eat that food.
Yes, I agree with you with everything. I think it's so important. And progress looks different for every family. Progress looks different for every child. And so for the parents who, and I will definitely put my hand up here, where you want to go at like 4,000 speed ahead, instead of going at 1,000 kilometers a mile ahead at 4,000 kilometers, you're going at like a centimeter. It sort of feels like
absolutely snail's pace.
Yes. So for parents
but it's funny, like when you look,
don't go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say
look. Okay, so progress isn't only measured by eating food. That's not our first stop. And I think when parents start to have that switch of mindset around that, it can help them move forward as well and remove some of those expectations that, for us, it might be, just sit down and eat the damn meal. Like, what's the problem? It can help us then to think about, well, what are they trying to tell us? That no isn't being defiant. It's trying to tell us something. What are we looking at? So I would say, and progress, as I said, can be big and can be small. So I had a child who I couldn't put fruit in general, any fruit near them. They would completely disassociate, shut down, leave the room, not want to participate at all. So we made, we then were able to move to pictures of fruit and then like fake fruit. And then we've gotten to a point now where he will help me prepare using only utensils. He won't touch the fruit itself, but he will help me prepare, say, a smooth, like using the fruit for a purpose that is for someone else, not for him. And that's taken 6 to 8 months to get to that point. But for his parents, that is a huge step for him, because he would just completely shut down or have a meltdown. So to get to that point, so it could be putting food on someone else's plate. It could be touching food, smelling food, or even licking food. It could be sitting at the family table without distress. So all of these things are progress. And it really is going to be small and over a period of time. And I do tell parents to think of it as a marathon and not a sprint, because particularly if we're looking at our extreme picky eaters, or kids with ARFID, or really strong sensory preference processing disorders and things like that, it could take months to years to reverse picky eating and help them, as opposed to weeks to months. So it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. But looking at progress in other lights, as opposed to not just eating that food, is really going to help parents to work forward and be positive and to have those strategies to continue going. Because the biggest thing I'll say to parents is we don't want perfection, we want consistency. And the one thing I will say, being a parent of an autistic child myself, who has been through this from a very young age to my son now as a teenager, we still have some sensory issues. So we're still very funny with fruit, but we found fruit we'll accept and ways we'll accept it. And we've now got an expanded diet because we've been consistent in our approaches and been supportive and working through that. So having that consistency is going to be your best friend, especially because a lot of children on the spectrum thrive on that routine. So when they know how things work, it's really going to help them as well. So that consistency over perfection, think of that. And it can be hard in today's society with, Instagram and being, information overload and being told, you're doing the wrong thing, or that, your child's just being stubborn, all that kind of stuff. It's hard to just tune all that out, but really looking at your child and thinking about what they're struggling with and how we can help that and them is going to be the best strategy forward.
Yeah, I know, I love that so much, because we can really get disheartened, especially like I am coming from a Greek background, and so food is our love language. And if you're not eating, you're like, do you not love me? Like, it's such a psychological warfare when your child is, but if they're not trying to be mean to you as a parent, they're managing their own nervous system, right? So it's got nothing to, and so much of the
absolutely
that I've seen with autism is that, parents will often take it so personally, like it's a direct attack to them, but really it's just this child trying to regulate their nervous system enough to just exist. And, for whatever the situation may be. But I want to ask you something. So with regards...
Well, can I just say on top of that, so I had a client yesterday whose Nana brought her into her therapy session, and she has very strong sensory processing issues. She needs a lot of vestibular and proprioceptive feedback. So she needs a lot of movement and heavy lifting and actions in sessions and stuff like that. But we've gotten to a really great place, and we've been working on some things. But Nana at the end said to me, dinners, when we've got the kids in the evening, dinners are really hard because all she wants are the noodles. She wants just her 2-minute noodles. And she's like, and I was getting frustrated, and my husband's getting frustrated. And she said, and I did a bit of research, and so she's like, I'm starting to see that it's not just being stubborn. And it's like, no, I'm like, she is struggling with that, but we can help her by, as I mentioned before, still have some noodles on the plate, but we're going to have, she likes chicken schnitzel. So have a few chicken schnitzel strips, have some strawberries and a few slices of carrot, and then we're going to have something else there as well. And she was like, oh, and I'm like, yeah. So it's taking that expectation away. And you're right, that guilt, because a lot of families, food is at the heart of most things we do, and it's something that we need every day. So a lot of people have opinions on it, particularly if you've never gone through anything with extreme picky eaters. Most people don't understand, and while their advice might be well-meaning, it's not needed often. So kind of that water off a duck's back, I will say, no one knows your child or children like you do, so you do what is best for them.
And it's, that older generation, right? Like, I don't know, I don't want to know, like, I'm an expert with picky eating, but I don't know if picky eating was around when, like, our parents were, when we were young, right? But that idea that the parents, especially my parents, right, if you didn't eat everything on your plate, you were going to bed hungry, right? This was shame, this was blame, this was like, you've done the wrong thing. So in that instance, right, you've sat down at the table, a child obviously hasn't eaten the dinner for whatever reason, their nervous system is shot. What do? Do you offer a backup plan? Do you send them just to bed hungry? Like what is the plan when that doesn't go to plan?
So this is where I tend to say we really want to focus on that mealtime structure. So as I've mentioned previously, so, if we've got our 2 to 3 main meals a day, and our 3 main meals a day and 2 to 3 snacks a day, and we're keeping that consistent, so we can then get to dinner, and let's just say that. And the other thing I think before I go into that is kids can smash food one day and then live off the smell of an oily rag the next day. So it can be up and down. Not every day is going to be the same. Some days kids are going to be eating great, other days they might not. But if we're taking that step back and looking at that overall day of their eating, and we can see that they smash their meals, then that's great. You can always have an after dinner meal. And the one thing I would say here in preface is that for me, as a professional, all eating opportunities are separate. They're never dependent on one meal. So a lot of families, it's if you don't eat dinner, you don't get dessert. It's a separate meal. So what I would be saying there is, if we've got our mealtime set up, we've got our 3 meals, 2 to 3 snacks, so we can look back and say they've, okay, maybe today they haven't eaten enough. We can then have another eating opportunity after dinner. What I find with a lot of parents, depending on what they're serving after dinner, so let's say they do have a dessert. I had one family at the moment saying to me that they were having ice cream. So the daughter would come to the table, maybe eat a little bit of the preferred food and go, well, I'm full now, but then dessert time, or straight after dinner, can I have my dessert now? So clearly we are still hungry, but we need to manage that. So we can do a few different things here. So we can bring, if that's happening and your child is is holding out on dinner to then get something after dinner that they love, bring that food into dinner. So it's a controversial opinion for a lot of people bringing dessert to dinner, but it's fine. We can make that portion of ice cream really small. So we're still getting a little bit of at dinner, but and initially they're going to go straight for it. But over time, it will just be another thing on that plate for them. And that will move them away from that holding out just to get that. So it brings that temptation away and removes that kind of, it's a special food. It's just a food. It's there. We eat it if you want to eat it. If you don't, you don't. Having an eating opportunity after dinner, I would say that after dinner meal, we are really thinking about, if the child hasn't eaten enough during the day, we want to give them something that's going to fill them up so they're not waking up during the night. So, that could be something like peanut butter toast and a glass of milk that's going to have healthy fats and proteins. That's where we want to try and balance some of those foods to give them. Or we could have a list of, and again, with kids, I would say don't go too comprehensive. Maybe just have a few options. You could have a few options for during the week, and you can have maybe a few options on the weekend that are different. But they can maybe 2 options. So, okay, well, you're still hungry. You can have a banana and a glass of milk or a piece of a muesli bar or something like that. So we can have options that they can pick, but they're ultimately our options that we've chosen, but they can have that perceived control and choose something that's going to give them something to keep them going, to get them through the night. Yeah. And again, while if your child is, we're starting this journey, that might be more of our reality to start with. But over time, it's going to decrease as we sort of start to get that predictability at meal times. We're looking at their food intake over the day, where we can start to structure that to help them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I actually really love the idea of bringing dessert into meal times. I think it's this idea that I'm going to eat. I don't want to get too full because I want to make sure that I'm getting my thing that I've been really hanging out for all day. So bring it in, like you said, and just having it as another meal, another piece of food is so good. But I wanted to ask you, okay, let's just say, and I don't know whether this is the case for other families, so this is why I'm really interested in it. In this case, if I put myself in this situation, my children are not fussy eaters, but I want to play this out. Son is autistic, daughter is neurotypical. If I was to bring dessert in for him and he was going to eat it and it was all great and he was doing well, and she was like, hold the front door, right? I want to have dessert with her as well, right? Are are we allowing that for our typical children as well? Or is that something that we're like, well, actually you're typical, so you can just wait until after dinner? Like, what's the deal?
No, not at all. It's for everyone. It's for everyone. So again, because not just neurodivergent children, but neurotypical kids in general, have this perception, and there's a reason. So when at the start of our talk, how we were talking about, some common, how picky eating is a common developmental milestone for a lot of kids. One of the biggest reasons here is that kids are biologically primed to want sweet food. And unfortunately for us, vegetables in particular tend to be more bitter. So they take time to learn how to eat. And also from a child's perspective as well, if we're, like the oral motor time of food spending in our mouth. So our vegetables and our meats are more fibrous and more textured. So they spend a lot of time in our mouth. So it can be fatiguing. And, depending on the age of the child, they can be big factors contributing to that. So I would be saying that whatever we're doing, it's as a family. So we can bring that in for everyone. It doesn't have to be just the neurodivergent child. As I said, it's more about managing the portions. So, we do 2 scoops. We might only be doing 1 scoop and bringing it into dinner, or half a scoop and bringing it into dinner to start with, to give them a little bit of ice cream, to try and then get some of that more eating at the table. What I would say is, with our eating opportunities, we want to have them it doesn't have to be set times, but if the child finishes their dinner and then automatically is like, I want dessert, well, then we could say, hey, dessert isn't until, and you might be say 20 minutes after dinner. So we might be saying, hey, dessert isn't until this time. So kitchen's closed until then. I'll leave your dinner here. If you still want it, you can come back to it. So if that in between that time, if they're hungry, they can come back to their dinner. We're not putting pressure on them to eat it, but it's there. And then the separate eating time is there. For children who are lower functioning, potentially with intellectual disabilities, who struggle with that interoceptive awareness around our hunger fullness cues. So they are constantly, I've got one boy I see who is level 3 autistic, limited verbal, and intellectually disabled. And his impulse control around food, particularly preferred foods, was, when I started working with him, was non-existent. So mum and dad had to have a lock on the kitchen cupboard so he couldn't get in. So in those instances, we are the ones who have to kind of manage and balance their eating. And so if parents are struggling with that and need help, that's something I can definitely do. But we want to then structure their eating and portion size it for them so we can move them through. So we, might know that, they're trying to get food, but we know that they've had enough. So then we might move to kind of trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? Move them on to something else, to divert their attention to something else, to work them through till it is time to eat. And that can be for neurotypical and other higher functioning kids as well. So if you're telling them, okay, well, kitchen's closed, dessert time's not until this time, and having visual timers can be very helpful because kids don't often have a great grasp of time. So having something that they can see counting down to when it is can help them. Having a set of activities that maybe we can, like as a toolbox that we can get them to do. So if they're coming to me saying they're hungry, but I know they might be, but I've said dinner's here if they want to finish it. Otherwise, this is the time dessert is, diverting them to an activity to then, if they want to come back and eat the food, they can. I'm not going to push it, but diverting them off to do something else to hopefully try and prevent a meltdown. So we want to kind of have that toolbox where we've got some strategies there that we can implement to support that, to work them through that as well, especially like when we're first starting to implement some of these. If your child is a grazer, we might only be starting slowly. So we might be starting just implementing sort of more structure at one meal and then the rest to try and work them through to then build it up slowly. We know, we work at the child's pace. We don't just implement things willy-nilly. We want to see what they're capable of and what they can what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, my brain. What they can not control, but what they're comfortable with. That's what I'm looking for, to help them move forward as well.
Yeah. At the pace. And it is about making sure that they feel comfortable making those changes. We actually have a question from one of our people who are live. The question says, do you work with kids who often are NG fed? I'm not entirely sure of the
So tube feeding, no. So I don't tend to work with children who are tube fed. That's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
So I would probably refer you on to a dietitian or speech therapist in relation to tube fed children.
Okay, I might get those details so that I can pass them on. She just said, so are often tube fed when sick, severe ARFID, less than 10 foods, iron infusions as iron level 3, constipation, and often in hospital for bowel washouts, less than 10 foods. Still recommend.
Tell her to get in touch with me.
Yep.
Because from what she's just mentioned, then potentially yes, that we could work together, but I could also direct her if I feel that I'm not the right person to support her, move her in the right direction. Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay.
But it was, I think in that instance, just getting used to what her specific circumstances are, because I don't want to just give general advice out, because that's a lot, and we want to make sure that we're supporting the child.
Oh, of course, absolutely. Before we finish up, can you tell the community about your freebie that you are happy to share with them?
Yes, so I've created a autism, nutrition and picky eating guide specifically for today. I think you'll have the link available to your members and people watching today to download. So that's sort of talking about, from everything we've talked about today, I've put that into a guide. So really helping you work through some practical strategies and starting to think about some starting points about where we can try and help move our child to think about the why they're struggling and help them build that safety skills and confidence to work through new foods.
And where can people find you?
So I online, my website is bewellnourishment.com. Online, Facebook is Be Well Nourishment. Instagram, I am family nutritionist _Tracy. And I also, I offer a range of services. So I work clinically in McLeod, Melbourne, the Little Footsteps Pediatric Clinic. I'm there 3 days a week. I do offer limited, depending on my availability, community support. So I do a range of daycare, kinder, school, home visits, supporting children in those environments with particular feeding issues. I also, at the moment, I have one workshop online, the Unfussy Eater program, which is a 6-week online program to walk parents through some of the steps we've talked about today to get them started. I am excited. I've got a new website and new programs coming, as well as a membership site to help parents in this area build a community to help move their kids forward and have support themselves. So if you follow me on social media, I will let you know when that's going to be up and running. I'm hoping in the next few months that'll be finalised and I can start to get that out to parents, because it's got some really great resources and some new courses that will walk parents through who are just beginning, to parents who may be struggling with this for years and need some targeted support and a community to support them as well.
That is amazing. I know parents will love that so much. So thank you so much for your time, Tracy. Is there anything that you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
I think just, parents, be kind to yourself. It is a very difficult thing, and it's, unfortunately, it's something we have to deal with on a daily basis because we need to eat every day. But if we start to really focus on that why, that is going to then give us the how and what we can do to help our kids move forward. And if you have listened or watched today and are sort of saying, oh my gosh, yes, tick, 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 I need help with that, feel free to get in contact with me. I offer a range of consultations, both telehealth, in person, online, that, if you need a plan put together, I can help you with that. But don't struggle, you're not alone. There is a way forward. It will take time, but we'll get there.
That is so amazing. Tracy, you have dropped so many gems today. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
See you
Beautiful.
later.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
See you later.